Okay, Section 2, the French Revolution unfolds, political social reforms at the National Assembly Institute in the first stages of the revolution. So we'll look at the political crisis, some of the in-between reforms that were enacted. They didn't get crazy right away. Then we'll look at some of the actions that the National Assembly took, and then analyze why there was mixed reactions around Europe to the events that were unfolding. So this just kind of describes, so people look at this phases. So again, one of the things to keep in mind is the test is going to kind of ask you about these different phases. So at the beginning, this National Assembly is going to go kind of middle of the road. It's going to add some new, keep some old. The radical, they're going to throw out all the old stuff and begin all over again. Phase 3, it's going to swing back to kind of keeping some of the new things, like for example voting, but try and kind of figure out a way not necessarily to have a king, but to have something that's a little bit less crazy than during the Reign of Terror. And then you've got Napoleon, and they refer to it as militant, but again, I think that kind of goes back almost to the way it was in the old days, because they go from an absolute ruler as a king to an absolute ruler in the form of an emperor of Napoleon. So when we look at the political crisis, again, these rumors are rampant. And part of it is because everybody is so uncertain about what's going on. But this is the period known as the Great Fear. There's all kinds of rumors that wealthy people are hoarding grain, and that the French army is going to come in and it's going to steal all the grain and all the bread. And really what this does is this tears things apart. So the peasants are going to take their anger out on those people who are closest to them, which are the nobles, the rich landowners. In Paris, what you start to see is these differing factions or groups. You got people who are on the extreme left, the extreme right, and those people who are in the middle. So again, you've got all of these differing ideas on how much change or too much change or not enough change or keep things the way they were. So all of that is splitting France up. One of the first things the National Assembly does is it ends these special privileges that nobles had dating back to the Middle Ages. Historians, sociologists can debate whether this is a big deal or not. Symbolically, it probably is, because it shows that the nobility are somewhat realizing the tide of things, and they're not fighting it, they're just kind of accepting it. Really, a lot of this stuff was kind of torn up once you have the National Assembly coming in the first place. But again, it's a symbol in the right direction. The other thing that they do is they create the Declaration of Rights of Man. So you see all of these Enlightenment ideals in there. One of the things to point out is this doesn't include women. So as enlightened as it is, you can still see that this isn't a total change from the old way of doing things. When we look at what are the values of the National Assembly, so that's been kind of hammered, especially in that assignment. Liberty, equality, fraternity. For liberty, basically the French understand liberty as long as what I do doesn't negatively impact or harm someone else, I'm free to do it. Equality, that justice is going to have a blind eye, that everyone's going to have a fair shake in the eyes of the law, and that merit base is how people are going to get jobs. People who work hard, who are talented, they're the ones who are going to get good jobs. Fraternity just kind of means, and this is the thing that's probably most debatable, because those other two are pretty clear cut, but in general, fraternity, brotherhood, the idea that this revolution, everybody needs to kind of be on board and stick together, and that united we stand, divided we fall. So that's kind of the basic idea. The other thing with the National Assembly is it starts to change some of the old institutions. The church probably being the biggest one that's going to get attacked here. But again, when you look at the church, it's the French Catholic Church, but that's under the direction of an Italian pope, or a pope that lives in Italy. So for the French people, they may not see a whole lot of connection to this, especially people who lived in the cities. Now, for more rural people, the church still is very important. But those are some of the different things that they're doing to impact the church and the power of the church, and as this cartoon is showing, squeeze some of the wealth out of it so that it's available for other people. The other thing that happens is, again, there's all kinds of rumors, and not everybody really knows what's going on. But because they're still low on bread, the women of Paris go out to the Palace of Versailles, and they are going to bring Marie Antoinette and the king back to Paris. That's 17 miles to Versailles. It's too far away. They claim that they want to keep the king and queen close to the people. But really, a lot of it is because of this distrust. Eventually, the National Assembly finally upholds their oath at the tennis court, and they create a constitution. It's going to be based on this Declaration of Rights of Man, but essentially it's going to create a limited monarchy. The king's still going to be in power, but there's going to be a legislature that's going to vote, and it's going to be kind of based on Great Britain's system. So it's going to be pretty close to that, except the king is probably even going to be a little bit more limited than in Great Britain. When that happens, Louis XIV is going to try and leave, and we really don't know exactly where he's going or what he's trying to do. Let's not focus on that too much, but more than likely he's leaving Paris because there's all these armed people that are always screaming and hooting and hollering, and there's a lot of uncertainty, and he's got young kids, and I'm sure they're scared, and Marie Antoinette kind of hates France anyway, and so regardless, they decide to disguise themselves as servants. They flee. One of the things that Louis XIV forgets is that his face is on all the paper money in France, and because of that, he's recognized and he's reported, and the ultimate thing about this is the people of France begin to see him as a traitor to the revolution, that he was skipping town, that he wasn't totally committed to the ideals of the revolution, and that's really going to doom him. For the rest of Europe, they're terrified that this whole thing is going to spread from France to their countries. They don't want this change and these radical ideas coming to their country. And it doesn't help that you have these emigres, these people who have fled France and are telling horror stories of what's going on in France. That just makes the people in other countries even more nervous about what will happen if these ideals of the French Revolution spreads to their country. So they're going to try and quarantine it and contain it just like a disease. Prussia and Austria are the first ones to really kind of get involved here, but that's probably because they, in a lot of ways, kind of have the most to lose, but also because when you look at Austria, the Emperor of Austria is Marie Antoinette's brother, so he's going to look out for her. But now what you have is France not only dealing with all these internal problems, but now they have these external threats from other countries. This is going to open the opportunity for radicals. They're going to take these threats and say, we need to respond. And the fact that the National Assembly really isn't doing much to address the economic problems, they still have a lot of debt, people still don't have enough to eat, and you see more and more middle-class people calling for changes. They want a republic, and the Jacobins are this radical group that are able to take control of this situation, and they get elected to the legislature, and pretty soon they're dominating the legislature. They're the biggest group there. With them now being in charge, they've decided that they're going to try and take this revolution and take it to the rest of Europe, that what France has going for themselves is awesome and great, and liberty and fraternity and equality is what all people across Europe should get. And this is going to put France against all of the major powers in Europe. The fact of the matter is, the National Assembly and all these other groups are going to face all the same problems. The average person still doesn't have food, and French debt is still going up. And until you address those things, you're really not going to create any kind of stability.